We're starting the stream. Then we'll start the if those of you listening in the channel, let us know how the audio and video sounds. I noticed this morning the first few seconds it stutters and then it gets going pretty good. So, all right, it is May 16th, 2018. This is the Kubernetes office hours for the West Coast. So we do these sessions twice a day, one in the morning here for the Europeans and one in the afternoon. So welcome everyone to today's Kubernetes office hours. This is where we live stream, where we answer your user questions live on the air with our esteemed panel of experts, these fine people here. But before we begin, let's introduce ourselves. Let's go Mario, Bob, Jeff, Josh.
Hi, everybody. I am Mario Loria. I work for a small company called LiquidWeb, and we do Kubernetes to bring e-commerce platforms to small and medium-sized businesses.
Hi, I'm Bob Killen with the University of Michigan. I sort of specialize in bare metal deployments, fun networking things like BGP, and all the crazy stuff that comes along with it.
Hi, my name's Jeff Rusika. I also work for the University of Michigan. I'm a developer by trade, and I work with the cron jobs and batch jobs areas in Kubernetes and other random stuff.
Hi, I'm Josh Burkus. I'm the Kubernetes community manager for Red Hat. So I work on managing our contributions to Kubernetes, and also I'm on the Kubernetes release team.
Awesome. All right. And while we go, users, feel free to go ahead and start asking questions in Slack. I'm going to go over the ground rules real quick. First of all, judgment-free zone. So everyone has to start from somewhere. So if you see someone asking a question in the channel, and there's no such thing as a dumb question. So we want to encourage people to ask questions and learn this stuff. So that's why we're doing this. While we will do our best to answer your questions, please be cognizant that we don't have access to your cluster. So if something is really, really deep and technical, and there's always some firewall or networking thing at work or whatever it is, we might not be able to help, but we can at least try to get you to a place where you can figure out where the problem lies. So please be cognizant of that. We will try our best, however. Panelists, you're encouraged to just expand on your answers. So we're not just here to help people with their questions, but to also understand concepts. So if you have any pro tips or any stories from you doing this kind of sort in production, please toss it in there. Same with those of you in the channel. Audience, you can help us out by pasting URLs to like docs, blog posts, or if you see something that you're familiar with and you're familiar with documentation and stuff, feel free to just whack it into the Slack channel. What we like to do is collect all the URLs of all of those resources we've shared and put those in the notes so that people are aware that these resources exist and kind of help bring eyes to those documentations. We are monitoring live on discuss.kubernetes.io, which is our shiny new user forum. We have a thread there, which I will paste in the channel now. And what we do is we're using this live thread to kind of keep track of questions. If you have a question on Stack Overflow that you want to remind us about, you can put it there. And it's also the place where we'll follow up with you if we can't answer a question. So this is a new resource for the Kubernetes community, and we're looking forward to using it to kind of help gather a whole bunch of information. And we'll put links to all the videos in there, and there's all sorts of good stuff in there. So keep your eyes out on that. You can help us out by tweeting, spreading the word, paying it forward, or letting people know that we exist, which is always fun. All of our sessions are live and recorded and available on YouTube going all the way back. So there's a playlist there if you want to subscribe. If you're watching the office hours like at work or something like that, and you feel that there's something that you can help tell us would make it better for you as far as like helping your team out at work or something like that, just let us know. We're always open to feedback. And if you want to sit in on this panel is volunteer, all staffed by volunteers. So if you want to share a story or you want to pay it forward, it's only 1 hour a month is the commitment. And but if you can only come 1 or 2 sessions, we can work something out. But if you're looking for a way to give back to the community, sharing your expertise is always a good way to do that. And if you do, you will earn the highly coveted Kubernetes water bottle. Mario, did you have that next to you there? I think. Yes, very, very rare item there. So we're always looking for help. And lastly, we'll be raffling another highly coveted item, the Kubernetes t-shirt. So what we'll do is if you ask your question, we'll keep track of all the people asking questions. And at the end, Jeff's highly sophisticated Python script will pick a random winner from all the people that have asked questions. I'll give you a code to the CNCF store, and then you can get yourself a Kubernetes t-shirt, which is fun to wear at parties. And while you're there, you can buy a whole bunch of other stuff for a bunch of other CNCF projects, like the Prometheus shirt, which is like really awesome also. All right, and lastly, always feel free to hang out and hash office hours throughout the month. If it's like an off time and you have a question and there's no office hours, you can put it in there and then we'll get to it eventually. We do run these monthly the third Wednesday of every month. So with that, unless anyone has any questions, we are ready to get started. And right off the bat, it looks like we have someone trying to run 18,000 cron jobs. And so who is involved with this? So is this a question we want to tackle first, or is this a meaty one that?
Yeah, because I think the answer to it is actually fairly direct.
Okay, so fill us all in on how we got here to this point, because I feel like we can kind of talk about.
So the original question was, someone is trying to schedule a cron job that runs every 15 minutes, and it is looking like it schedules every 30 minutes or so. But then when we dove a little bit deeper, we found out that that's one cron job out of 18,000 cron jobs on that cluster.
Okay.
That's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. And I'm almost certain that the reason why that's happening is that the cron job manager more or less goes through all of the available cron jobs serially.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm willing to bet that that particular cron job is not the only one of theirs that is actually being late, simply because the cron job manager doesn't get to checking whether or not it should run frequently enough.
Okay, so let's frame this question. Is that a lot of cron jobs?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
let's put everything in this scale of perspective here. So like what would be something that would be blocking cron jobs, let's say? Right? Is this like, do you run out of master? Like what controls the scalability of cron jobs?
I mean, the problem is that the cron job is, at least in its first incarnation, and I don't believe this has changed, the cron job manager basically loops through all of the cron jobs that you have in your list.
Mm-hmm.
Like once per minute. And with
10 seconds.
Cron jobs, it's not going to actually make it through all of them in less than a minute.
Sure. So what happens then? Does it, as it gets through the minute or the 10 seconds that Bob said, does another process start going through them again and again? Is this like, are you kind of DDoSing yourself here?
I don't think so. No, it's controller code, so I don't think it clobbers itself.
Okay.
But the result is that you can end up with a lot of cron jobs running late.
Right.
Now, for this particular user's use case, so the reason why it's 18,000 cron jobs is it's ETL, that is extract, transform, load. In other words, they're taking a whole bunch of data and pipelining it from one place to another and doing changes to it on the way, presumably for a large variety of clients. I would also argue that there's a second reason why you don't want to use the built-in cron jobs for it. Like I would say, definitely take this to SIG apps. This is an interesting performance problem. I bet this will be the first they've dealt with this use case with over 10,000 cron jobs. Mm-hmm. And it would be interesting to fix the performance problems there. However, there's another reason why I personally would not use cron jobs for a large-scale ETL use case, which is that there's insufficient tracking. So when you have ETL cron jobs, some of them need to run once within X period. Some of them are actually what we call backfill cron jobs, as in they need to run once per hour, and if you miss several, we need to backfill the hours that they missed, as an example. Whereas others get superseded by later cron jobs, etc. So there's a whole complicated set of logic that we're not prepared to, and you need to know when they missed, right? You need to know if they didn't run for certain jobs, and particularly if you've got 18,000 of them, you need actually like a good console to tell you which ones did not run and why. And the existing built-in cron jobs are not going to supply you with that functionality.
Sure.
when I was at Mozilla, we actually designed a separate system for this that I believe is still out there in open source, to specifically deal with the same kind of issue at Mozilla. And I think that's the direction that they're going to need to go with the ETL, because I can't see building that level of sophistication into the Kubernetes cron jobs. The Kubernetes cron jobs are meant to be much more generic.
Okay. So Dylan goes on to ask, he goes, could we just increase the 10 seconds to a minute? And Vaisky says that it's hard coded. Then Mario goes, throw a sleep in there. That we don't. You were kidding, right? We don't like that.
Absolutely kidding.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I was like, man, maybe you shouldn't be on the panel. Just
the jobs API could definitely use a little bit of love. There's a lot of like to-dos and some of the other stuff in the code too.
Is this something that could be maybe mitigated by perhaps having multiple smaller clusters, as opposed with maybe organizing the different types of cron jobs per cluster? Or is this, are we not wedging stuff that doesn't?
I still think with, just piggybacking off what's been said already, like this is the cron jobs API is like not really meant for this sort of thing, and developing your own thing would probably be a more worthwhile thing to do than anything else.
I don't even necessarily think develop. Like Josh said, Mozilla has their own open source thing, and there are other things that fill this gap. I mean, like in the background, GitLab is using Sidekick. You can do stuff with like celery queues that gives you a much better management interface for jobs that you need to make sure run on a certain schedule.
I was going to say a queuing system, Celery, something that really, like, if you have 18,000 cron jobs, I think at that point you need to just take a step back, look at the 10,000 foot view with the goal you're trying to achieve, and really evaluate the best way to do that. And I don't think Kubernetes cron jobs is probably going to be your best bet for that. So it might take some architecting, but not to say that Kubernetes, we're giving a pass on the platform and saying, oh, it shouldn't be able to handle these. Like that's fine. Not exactly. It should be able to do it well, but that's a lot of cron jobs for sure.
All right. Any other comments, tips? All right, we will move on. If at any time I miss any of your questions, if you posted on the channel, please feel free. I saw one here from MMLAC says, just want to know when to use API aggregates versus CRDs. Looking at writing, quote, operators for databases and API aggregates seems, quote, superior, but everyone seems to use CRDs for that, question mark?
I might not have a good answer for this, but I believe there was actually this came up during a little bit during the contributor summit, and I think during another not panel, but there's another thing at KubeCon EU about this. Let's see if I can find the actual thing.
Sure.
I mean, are they really different things? Don't like currently rewritten CRDs make use of API aggregation?
As far as I know, yes. I think it's just a style thing.
Yeah, so I mean, a CRD is basically packaging, right? I mean, when you look at a CRD, you're like, hey, I'm going to take an API server. Well, I'm going to take at a minimum a custom controller, potentially an API server, potentially a scheduler, custom scheduler, and some syntax extensions, custom objects for kube control, etc., and bundle them all together into a package that can be deployed all at once. I mean, that's really what a CRD is. So it's not really an either or. I mean, could you use API aggregation and not package stuff as a CRD? Yes. But I don't see the advantage in not packaging it.
Okay, hopefully that gives you a little insight. MMLAC, sorry, I don't know what your full name here is, but if you have a Marcus, if you have a follow-up question, just go ahead and whack that in the Slack channel as well, and we'll get back to it. If at any time we mention something and it's not clear to you, viewers, absolutely feel free to just ask it in the Slack channel. So if you don't understand anything and you want us to go back and re-explain stuff, I'm more than happy to do that.
This would also probably be a great thing for Discuss, tossed on there and get a couple other people that might be more familiar with API aggregates and CRDs to chime in.
Yep, that would work. If can you toss a URL to discuss there in Slack while I move on to the next question? Hangover Nero asks, that's a great name. Hi guys, could anyone explain to me what does check service affinity means when my pods are in the pending state? Did we lose Jeff? Looks like we did.
So I actually do not know the answer to this, and I did a really quick search and didn't see anything in the documentation at all, which isn't too surprising. But I would also kind of like to know the answer to this.
Is this a new thing?
There's I saw a GitHub issue that was filed and closed relating to it. It's obviously a scheduler construct, but what services have to do with scheduling a pod in terms of placing it, that'd be interesting. Possibly something with configuring the service to point to another. If you have many pods creating many endpoints that the service must be updated with. But I wonder if someone knows more than I do.
Yeah, the two issues I see them with are OpenShift related, but I don't know if this is an upstream thing or not.
It should be an upstream thing, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, I just only see it mentioned in regards to OpenShift.
I'm just looking through the code now to try and find something.
Okay. Want me to come back to this?
Yeah, it's probably a good idea.
Yep. Okay. Hang tight. I guess we'll see what we got for you here. Let's see who's next. Scrolling. Still trying to sort out the 18,000 cron jobs. M asks, are there use cases where you want to have separate informers instead of using shared informers, or should you always use the shared version?
I believe you always want to use the shared version. Like, I believe it's a huge efficiency gain for Kubernetes overall. Mm-hmm. But haven't worked on developing anything with the informers. And so that's based entirely on troubleshooting with certain pull requests. And I'd like to get another opinion on that.
Mm-hmm. Barmer Mario? And Jeff apparently has lost internet, so...
Yeah, hopefully he can come back, maybe. I have nothing really to add on that.
Yeah, I haven't done anything with it personally. Sorry.
Yeah. All right, maybe that might be something you want to post on Discuss or Stack Overflow and pass the link back to us, and then we can follow up with you on that one. JD Man asks, how do I copy files to a persistent volume, either at creation time or at another time? I'm using Helm.
Copy files from what? I mean, you could use like an init container to sort of stage the data.
Yeah, it says, how do I copy files to a persistent volume?
Yeah, so an init container is probably going to be your best bet. I like to run sidecars for doing things like backups off to S3 from maybe a persistent volume that's being used for the application. But you're doing kind of the opposite. You're probably getting from some outside source and copying over. So SCP or whatever API you want to tap into to do that, and just copy into the volume itself. And so making sure the volume is available to that init container would be really your only thing, and then having it execute a command to do that. I've done fancy like encryption. In your case, it'd be kind of copy an archive, decrypt, and then extract the archive or whatever you're trying to do. So that'd probably be the easiest way. And then with he mentioned he's using Helm. Yay, awesome, good job. But I mean, that really just makes it easier. You'd probably edit your templates to allow a functionality where you're running an init container as well. And then you can kind of set the key parameters for maybe variables around where to get that data or how to authenticate to the source to get that data, et cetera. And pass those in as values when you launch your application. That'd probably be how I would go about it.
Mm-hmm. And along the same line, Hangover Nero again has another follow-up. Another thing, what will be a good practice for mounting a directory, single directory, and multiple pods as read-only?
And you can just mount it read-only.
Yeah, is that the best practice?
I think pretty much.
Yeah.
And if you need to do it for the whole like PVC, you can even have the entire like PVC be read-only.
Right. Yeah, that's going to be your best bet, and that's all just in the configuration. So.
Yep. And it looks like Jeff's back. Good, because he's the one that keeping track of the questions in the raffle. So that would have been disastrous. Let's see. JD Band wants to say that makes sense. Thanks. You're welcome. Ding. More questions. So while the channel queues up more questions, you got anything for us, Jeff, from earlier in the day?
I do, from Kubernetes novice users. Jay Taff, I have a strange issue. We are using resource limits to cap memory usage for a pod, but the container inside the pod is actually allocating more memory. It seems that it does not respect the actual memory limit set. Any idea what might be going on?
It's Java.
Actually, I believe that it might be Java because I think someone asked that.
Yeah, but it's not just Java.
Yeah, it's not just Java.
C-group memory limits are a guideline rather than a rule.
Yeah, can we tease this out a little bit to kind of talk concepts? So basically, so you've got your you set your C-group memory limit. But if I try to malloc memory larger than that limit, the kernel doesn't actually stop me. Instead, what happens is if I allocate sufficient memory over the C-group limit, eventually the kernel OM killer comes back around and kills my container. Right.
This has been sort of a long-standing issue open with Linux C-groups and namespaces, in that a lot of us in the application development space would prefer to have the malloc fail when we attempt to allocate memory beyond the C-group limits, but that is not how it currently works.
Mm-hmm. And you don't really have control of when the killer shows up, right?
Right.
It just kills things. So
it sounds like default, that's effectively kind of a soft limit, if you will, right? You might be able to allocate more, but there's no guarantee that you'll still be alive to kind of keep that extra, right?
Your application or framework has to sort of like willingly adhere to it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any other comments on that one?
I can actually, if it is Java 10 will actually respect the C group limits. And then I believe there's an experimental flag for Java 9 where you can enable it as well.
Yeah, I'm kind of drawing a blank here, but are we aware of any kind of resources? Like, it feels like Java 10's container native features and fixes have been quite substantial.
Definitely.
They're not all listed in one place, are they? That's a rhetorical question. That might be a great blog post. I wonder if we can get someone to... We should get a Java person to kind of collate those together. Because it seems like for a lot of these, we're like, well, Java 10 will fix all of this. So, okay, all right. Andres TC, welcome, asks, any recommendations for running services with direct server return inside the cluster? Is running pods as host network the only option? We are using, what is this? L3 DSR from Yahoo. Direct service return load balancing across layer 3 boundaries. Cool. I am not familiar with this at all. Let's give Bob some chances to read.
Well, yeah, I was going to say Bob would be after.
Yeah,
well, yeah, I've never done
this.
DSR with Kubernetes. I mean, Kubernetes at its main point is meant to be, focal ingress for your applications, right? So direct server return is basically a concept of a load balancer offloading a client to talk directly to a backend service by basically sending it a direct path to get to it, right? And I'll let Bob take it from there.
So I know you can do some DSR settings with things like kuberouter, but you have to be running like BGP and use BGP with your like top rack switches. And kuberouter also supports like ECMP. So that way, when it's going down to like if you have a pod running on multiple hosts, it'll actually be smart and only direct the routes to the hosts that are running the hosts that are actually running the service or the pod that's mapped to it behind the scenes. That's probably your best bet. I think there's I don't know if Calico supports DSR. I don't know. I'd take a look at kuberouter.
I think it might. I mean, really, Calico is just hacking on IP tables, so I feel like it should be able to support that. Maybe not natively, but at some point, possibly. So that's a really good question.
Sorry, this kuberouter here. Is this the one you're recommending? I just pasted it in the.
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
Actually, DigitalOcean had a really great presentation at KubeCon EU about their usage of it.
Okay, kuberouter, DigitalOcean. Global container networks on Kubernetes at DigitalOcean. Hey, you know what? Having these talks available to us
is awesome.
And they're available almost the same day that they get the talks. So that's really handy. Literally hours and hours of stuff there. Those of you that are listening, if you click through there to the CSAF channel, there's an entire playlist of all the talks at KubeCon. So it makes good for good listening and watching. Do we have any more questions from the audience? Now, Jeff, I feel like we should only raffle to the people that showed up to ask their questions.
All right, then I will not add them.
They do not count because they're not here.
I
think the people who are participating should get preference. Call it participation affinity, if you will.
They get the gold star.
They get the gold star. Josh is still looking for the Socorro, I guess it's called, which is that scheduling thing from Mozilla. It's very interesting.
So I couldn't find any more info on the one earlier question with the check service affinity.
Yeah.
So it'd probably take a little bit more like digging to really find anything like truly fruitful.
Yeah, I feel like we should definitely put that either on Stack Overflow or discuss and see if we can get some. Sorry, I've got Beagle problems. I feel like we should definitely do some more digging on that one. All right. Let's go grab us one from the backlog there, Jeff, while the live audience figures out more questions. Let's see. Kubernetes users is just, compared to this morning, it's dead. I mean, it's crazy.
Everyone's taking a late lunch.
Yeah, it must be. So a question from the backlog. And Jeff is frozen. Our backlog gentleman is frozen.
Is he frozen? Okay. Yeah. I actually have a really quick one that sure. Came in shortly after last office hours, and that is around dev, QA, and prod environments for deployments, separate namespaces, separate clusters, or a mix of both. And someone trying to understand kind of what's the best approach for this. And Jeff actually responded quickly from the logs here, and he basically said it depends on the app, how big it is, how invasive it could be at a lower level with underlying components. His kind of generic was dev should be maybe completely separate, while QA or maybe staging and production are probably namespace the same or kind of in the same subnet or however you want to do that. And I think this is a really open-ended question. It's very dependent on what you're trying to do. I think the core answer from kind of what I've seen and what most people try to attempt is some separation between prod and other environments, right? And creating a place for a pipeline to really come to fruition with your CI/CD and what you're trying to achieve. So I think definitely having a dev is a fantastic idea. I've seen people that just have a dev and a prod, and that's it. They're just a playground and then production. So now at my company, we actually separated literally at the IP tables. Layer 3 level, right? Which is a little bit crazy. I mean, even DNS is separated, right? Like they can't talk to the same DNS server. They have their own individual DNS server, which is a little bit ridiculous. And I don't know if I'd recommend that, but you definitely want enough separation that you feel comfortable saying that I can ship my app in production and know that it's running in the same kind of parameters, but also nothing you're doing in your dev or staging environments is going to interfere.
Good to know. It looks like Jeff's having internet problems again, so we'll wait for him to come back here while we move on. Next, Dylan asks, what is the fastest way to find which master is the leader without SSHing into it all? He's on AWS.
I think there's an if you get endpoints of like the kube controller manager or whatever you're looking to get the leader for, there'll be an annotation telling you which one is the leader.
Okay, Mario, are you nodding profusely, or did you have your own?
No. I agree with what Bob is saying. So,
okay. While we wait for more questions, I do have a question from earlier that I want to frame for Josh a little bit here, because people do ask about stateful sets and databases and stuff, and I like to make Josh repeat himself all the time. Let me just go back here for a bit. And don't mind me. Where is it? Almost there. Wow, we've had a busy day.
Yeah. I think if you just like find MySQL.
Yeah. So Saqib asked this morning, he goes, questions. I have a general question regarding to on-prem deployment where cloud services aren't an option. I want a DB that's HA, say MySQL in a Kubernetes cluster. How can I achieve this? I know that's a general question. And he says, starting group replication or MySQL clustering containers is fine, but I get bothered by volume storage. Should I have local volume storage on each node, or should I have some network storage? And people started dropping in some hints. We talked about Vitesse a little bit this morning. And since, Josh, you are my database guy.
Yeah. Well, so for MySQL, you've got a couple. First of all, you have to kind of decide how you're dealing with database redundancy.
Mm-hmm.
Because your main choices between MySQL are single master replication. In which case you probably want to use something like Vitesse to manage replication and failover for you.
Mm-hmm.
Or alternately, I know a lot of people use MySQL with Galera on Kubernetes, and Galera is multi-master replication, and that has the advantage that you don't necessarily have to worry about master failover. It does have the disadvantage in that you need more MySQL nodes per database than you would for a solution like Vitesse.
Mm-hmm.
So part of that's also going to depend on how many databases you have and how heavily loaded they are. If you have a lot of lightly loaded database, then single master with Vitesse is probably going to be the way to go. If you have fewer, larger databases, Galera is probably going to be the way to go. In terms of storage, all this runs on stateful sets. Stateful sets are making the assumption that the storage that you are putting the database on is somehow available to new nodes if your pod gets moved. How that's available is kind of up to you. In terms of in terms of are you using network storage, are you using some kind of clustered storage like Gluster or Rook that handles copying across all of the nodes or whatever? Are you using something like Portworx that handles copying on the file system?
Mm-hmm.
All of these are viable storage options depending on your situation. I will say that for my PostgreSQL-based solution, sometimes I cheat and just use local storage and count on PostgreSQL replication for recovery, depending on the setup. And in that case, you're basically assuming you're going to lose the storage anytime the pod moves. However, there's a risk inherent in that, which is that if you lose the entire Kubernetes cluster at any point, then you need to have an alternate database recovery mechanism, because there's no guarantee that when the cluster comes back up, the database pods will get scheduled in the same nodes and thus have the local storage available to them. In the future, when we've got topology-aware storage scheduling available, it might be possible to actually make it a lot more probable that database nodes will start up in the same local nodes based on storage availability. But that's not a stable feature yet. And I would never rely on it 100%. I would have something like offline cold backup that could be used to restore all the database systems, or just use clustered or network storage that's going to be available to all nodes.
All right, Mario, I know you have some experience with Portworx. Anything to add as far as I don't know if you're using them with stateful sets and databases or.
We are not. I would venture to say that a lot of people are looking at shared file system support, and that is a feature which we used quite a bit and have now stopped using because it is very unreliable. I think in time it will become much more efficient, but I think right now there's a lot more work. More specific, very much to Portworx. There's other solutions that are providing this as well, and there's charts out there that kind of give you a breakdown of the services that can do this. But I think whenever you're doing something with shared storage, definitely do your testing and know what you want to look for in terms of performance, right? So be very cautious tiptoeing there. I do very much agree with Josh on the maybe using host storage, right? Because you know what you're getting, the reliability and robustness, and it forces you to think more horizontally about how you actually deploy your application. And then for things like offsite backups as well, you don't have to worry about a distributed storage platform and everything that goes along with it. So not to say that they're bad, I think a lot of the redundancies and replicas that some of the new distributed storage platforms provide can be very good for non-shared storage per se. And when I say shared, I mean like live file systems to multiple pods. That particular feature is what I think needs a lot more effort and testing. So that's my 2 cents on it.
All right. Any other comments on databases? And then we have Carlos, and that looks like the hippie hacker. Do you want to introduce yourself, or are you just following in? No mic? Okay, just listening in. Awesome. Welcome. Hippie hackers here. Are you just listening in, or are you participating?
I'm here.
Oh, awesome. You want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. My name is Hippie Hacker, and I've been doing some work for the CNCF for the projects through CI to integrate all of the different projects that we're curating. And most recently, I've been shifting into snooping into the Kubernetes API. So that's under GitHub CNCF/API snoop, and digging into test infra and a couple other portions of the community.
Oh, cool in the game. Happy to have you.
Thanks.
All right, we're actually waiting for some more questions from the channel. I'm going to go ahead and pop into Kubernetes users and grab more, although the channel does not seem to be as hopping as it was earlier this morning. We think everyone's at a late lunch. It's okay. And we just finished talking about databases and stateful sets. I don't know if you have any strong opinions on that. So let's see. All right, I'm going to head back into the backlog then from Jeff, who's having internet problems still. Forster would like to ask, anyone know what happens if you configure a deployment max unavailable :0 and pod disruption budget max unavailable to 1? Which one wins? And I'm going to go ahead and post the question in the channel so you can see exactly. And then we'll get to your CNI question right after.
I am honestly uncertain which one will win. I'm pretty sure it'll be the. I don't know. I'd have to try.
I'd say the deployment max unavailable, but yeah, that's another one where I'd have to try or look at the code to see which one took precedence.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Don't worry, we have a network one coming up for you here, Bob. You ready? M asks, can you go over how CNI works in a cluster, like how the kubelet/Docker interact with using it with something like Flannel? That's apparently what they're using. Can you give us a broad?
Okay, well, CNI is just like a very, very easy to use plugin networking model that's used by Kubernetes and I believe Mesos as well. Docker uses the container network management thing. But essentially, like, you can run your networking just as like a daemon set. And your pod will get like a veth pair that's plugged into the CNI driver that manages the actual networking under the hood. There's actually like a pretty good amount of like documentation on it. As far as it working cluster wise, like when it comes to like deployments, it's pretty much just a daemon set. It depends on which one you're going with. I don't actually use Flannel. I use a couple other ones. Flannel, I believe, is like VXLAN, which is like Mac and Mac encapsulation. Do you have anything like particular about it you want me to dive into?
And then we'll just give you a few minutes to respond to that. I see other people typing. We're getting close to 15-minute warning here, so if you have a question, because I'd like to save some time at the end for the raffle. Looks like Jay Hernandez says this is from the docs. Pods which are deleted or unavailable due to a rolling upgrade to an application do count against the disruption budget, but controllers like deployment and stateful set are not limited by PDBs when doing rolling upgrades. Anyone have anything to add to that? Okay, we'll go ahead and do last call for questions. So, and then we'll start to wrap it up soon and do the t-shirt raffle. Let me give you another backup question here in the meantime. Mesut asks, what is the best practice for redirecting HTTP traffic comes to an application running on Kubernetes to HTTPS? First thing that comes to mind is creating a pod with a simple Nginx config in it. Opinions here.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this is basically how do you build your application to accept the sort of ingress coming from your core ingress controller. That the majority of people will basically, when they ship their application, it's a pod, and it is the application running in one container, and then an Nginx container running in front of that that thing, and providing for us where we have Nginx, PHP, FPM working as well, and so that's really one of the best ways to do it, because you can really get away with a super simple Nginx config, and really most of your any problems you have are not really going to stem from that Nginx instance, depending on what you're doing. You want to be careful with things like headers, obviously. You'll want to be careful with things, especially around load balancing and trying to carry an IP address, source IP address, back to the actual application. That can get a little bit tricky. So definitely some things to think about there, but Nginx is definitely a very safe bet for what you're trying to do, I'd say.
Yeah. Any other comments on forcing over to HTTPS? Hangover Nero asks, no luck with check service affinity. Unfortunately, no. We're gonna have to do our homework on that one, as far as I know. And then Vaisky, I guess, is clarifying. I guess the question is how to 302 direct everything coming in from port 80 to HTTPS something.
Oh, dir, yeah, I totally derped there really awesomely hard. Yeah, there's wow. So continuing what I was saying, you can actually do this at the application level, or you can do this at the edge ingress controller, right? And that the edge ingress controller is the best place to do it, so that you're not wasting cycles going sending traffic back to your application for it to then make a simple routing decision. So look at the ingress controller docs for Nginx, and you should be able to see. I believe there's an annotation that you can set up in the ingress definition to do this. Sorry about that. I kind of derped there. But the other thing here is a lot of people actually, a lot of the ways SSL is handled or TLS is handled can be at the edge, where your edge ingress actually handles the TLS to the client, and then it's unencrypted getting to the application itself from the edge ingress controller. But also a lot of people like to forward it through all the way to the application as well. And so that's where your application specific ingress can be useful as well. So,
and that's obviously depends on the ingress controller that you're using, right?
Of course, very much. When I'm talking, I'm generally talking about Nginx, on bare metal, which is quite flexible and kind of the main one for most people approaching Kubernetes.
Yeah. So one thing we learned this morning was people ask ingress questions. We need to start asking which one specifically.
Yes, for sure.
As the path question this morning, we had to go back and ask, but that's okay. Dylan has a follow-up to his previous question. How do I easily get the external IP of the leader node? So I guess the command, the get endpoints thing that Bob showed him only shows an internal IP.
Yeah, you'd get the internal IP and then get which pod or like get the IPs of the pods that are running it, and then map.
No, did we lose him?
Hell of a time to lose the internet, huh?
Yeah. Wow. What is going on?
Next time, say the answer quickly, then fluff it.
He'll jump into Slack and follow up with you, Dylan.
Yeah. Sorry about that, Dylan. So both Jeff and Bob, their town had like a main water break, and I guess it's causing all sorts of infrastructure issues over there. So with that, we're going to start wrapping up here soon and do the raffle. I see a few people typing, so why don't we give it a few minutes and then move on from there. Vaisky would like to add, the endpoint will be part of a pod CIDR, so check with the other pods. They're in the same /24 or something. And then PM Webster is also typing furiously, looks like. So we'll give people some time here. People still talk. Just out of curiosity, Mario, do both you and Josh have an XPS 13? You definitely have the XPS 13 angle.
Yeah, so I have an XPS 15. I mean, same difference though. The tiny bezel, which is gorgeous, and I love it. You basically get a 15-inch screen and a 14-inch laptop, and that's really what I love about it.
You have to use the nostril cam.
Yes,
nostril cam is where it's at. Yeah, and it forces you to really clean up in the morning and make sure you're looking slick.
PM Webster asks, we use external endpoints as a proxy to external services to pull in stats to Prometheus. I was wondering if there's a high-end limit of endpoints to where it's putting a strain on the Kubernetes cluster. Feels like everyone's coming back from lunch now because everyone's starting to join the channel. Questions on this one? Or, sorry, recommendations on this one?
I don't really have much to add on this. If there's a high-end limit of endpoints to where it's putting a strain, I don't really know where the strain would come in. I have never dealt with that, so I would say maybe a Stack Overflow or maybe a discussion. That'd be a good discussion item.
I think you'd put a strain on Prometheus way sooner than Kubernetes would get upset about.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Because Prometheus would have to handle all that data.
Any other opinions on this? Since we've lost two of our panelists, so We're running at 50% capacity.
We're running in degraded mode right now.
Yes.
Our RAID array is RAID 6.
Yeah. Yeah, both Bob and Jeff's internet is totally in and out, so I think they're on like mobile devices trying to slack in. So I think that would be, unless, we'll give it one last question if someone has an easy one, and then we'll go ahead and start to wrap it up. So let's see who's asked new questions here. So PM Webster asked a question, and Dylan asked the question here. So we're gonna run the raffle now. Mario, do you have do you have Jeff's little Python import random thing?
I do not.
I am streaming on a Windows machine, so I do not have Python handy. 1 second. In the meantime, what is better from a security point of view, to only have a cluster of Kubernetes and network segment the nodes, or to have multiple clusters?
If you can, cool. If you can hand me the list of names, I can randomize it.
Sure.
On this question, lower level. This is also a good discussion item, I suppose. The lower level you separate, the better you're going to be from a security perspective. From my NetEng kind of background, like definitely setting boundaries around the layer 2, layer 3 network is going to be better from a security point of view. You want to try to implement security at as low a layer as possible. So, yeah.
Sweet. Any follow-up there? Or any comments? All right, and we're going to wrap it up here. Let me go into the outro while Josh figures out the winner of our T-shirt raffle. Thanks, everyone, for participating, especially our panel. I actually have a whole little outro section here. So thanks to the following companies for supporting the community with the developer volunteers. This is Amazon, Bitnami, GiantStorm, Heptio, Liquid Web, Northwestern Mutual, Packet.net, Pivotal, Red Hat, Weaveworks, University of Michigan, VMware, and the CNCF. That's for you, Hippie Hacker. Sorry. Soon we'll be holding a lot more raffles with different Kubernetes spinners and all sorts of great things. But for today, we're going to do T-shirts. Feel free to hang out and hash office-hours afterwards. We definitely owe you a follow-up on what was the one? The check service affinity, I think, is something we should follow up on. I think we'll definitely discuss that. I'm having dinner with the fellows here in a little bit, and we will figure out how to get you a better answer for that. And with that, Josh, do you happen to have our winner? And you're muted.
Lack is our winner.
All right. So how do we spell that? Which one is that one?
MMLAC. I
Yep.
don't know what the actual name is.
You've won the T-shirt. So if you're listening, PM me. Emma, is he still on? Hold on.
He is, yeah.
He's here. All right, you won a T-shirt. I will PM you right after this and give you a code to the wonderful CNCF store where you can get this fine quality item here, highly coveted by many. So congratulations. As always, we do these on the third Wednesday of every month. Please help us spread the word. If we weren't able to answer your questions, sorry. We will be doing follow-ups on discuss.kubernetes.io, which is here. I'm pasting the link on. So if you feel like you only got a partial answer, or you want some more follow-up, or you dig and you get your solution and you end up with a whole bunch of more questions, our experts frequently visit the board. And with that, thank you to our panelists for accepting these questions, and we will see everyone on the third Wednesday of next month, which is, what's the date? June 20th. And with that, thanks everyone.
Nice.
And we'll see everyone, and happy Kubernetesing.
For sure.
Yeah. Cheers.
Check out Discuss.Kubernetes as well.
Yep.
It's awesome.
Bye, everyone.